London, 1875. Sophia Ormond clutched the newspaper with trembling fingers, her eye scanning the announcement that would seal her fate. The bold print of the London Gazette seemed to mock her with its finality: notice of bankruptcy proceedings, the estate of the late Mr. Harold Ormond, merchant of Threadneedle Street, being insufficient to satisfy outstanding debts. The modest parlour of her family home, soon to be former home, closed in around her. 3 months of mourning her father, only to discover he had left nothing but debts. The black crepe of her dress suddenly felt suffocating rather than proper. Miss Ormond. Mrs. Finch, their housekeeper of 15 years, appeared at the doorway. Lord Sherrington's carriage has arrived. Sophia folded the newspaper hastily. Thank you, Mrs. Finch. I shall receive him in the drawing-room. The Earl of Sherrington was her father's primary creditor, a man she had never met but whose name had appeared with alarming frequency in her father's papers. She smoothed her skirts, patted her chestnut hair, and steeled herself for what would certainly be an unpleasant encounter. The drawing-room, once the pride of her mother's decorative talents, now seemed faded and sparse. Several paintings and ornaments had already been sold to pay the servants' wages. Sophia stood by the window, watching as a tall figure emerged from an immaculate black carriage. When the door opened, she turned to face the Earl. Lord Alexander Sherrington stepped into the room with the confidence of a man who had never questioned his place in the world. His tailored charcoal frock coat accentuated broad shoulders, his cravat was tied in a perfect knot, and his expression was as severe as the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. Miss Ormond. He bowed slightly, appraising her with cool grey eyes. Lord Sherrington. She curtsied, keeping her spine rigid. I appreciate your willingness to discuss my father's situation. Situation, he repeated, his lips curving without warmth. A rather gentle term for bankruptcy, wouldn't you agree? Sophia flinched but maintained her composure. Please, won't you sit down? The Earl settled into an armchair, placing his hat and gloves beside him. I'll be direct, Miss Ormond. Your father borrowed substantial sums from me to fund his merchant ventures. The collateral was this house and its contents. Yes, she said quietly. I've reviewed the documents. Then you understand that legally, I now own the roof over your head. The bluntness of his statement made her stomach tighten. I do, my lord. I've been preparing to vacate by month's end. And where will you go? His question seemed born of idle curiosity rather than concern. Sophia lifted her chin. I've written to several families seeking a position as a governess. I'm well educated and a governess. He made the word sound like a disease. Is that truly the best solution you could devise? I have limited options, my lord. I have no relatives willing to take me in, no dowry to speak of, and I must earn my living somehow. Lord Sherrington studied her for a long moment. The ticking of the mantel clock filled the silence between them. I have a proposition for you, Miss Ormond, he finally said. Sophia tensed. She had heard stories of aristocrats making propositions to women in desperate circumstances. As if reading her thoughts, his lip curled slightly. Not that kind of proposition. I assure you. She blushed deeply. Forgive me, I didn't mean to imply, my sister died 6 months ago, he interrupted, his voice suddenly flat. She left behind a daughter, my niece, Lady Caroline. The child is 8 years old and has frightened away 3 governesses already. Sophia blinked, unsure where this was leading. I require someone of good breeding and education to care for her. Someone who can teach her proper deportment and manage her. He paused, high spirits. You're offering me employment. After a fashion. Lord Sherrington leaned forward. I'm offering you marriage. Sophia gasped, certain she had misheard him. I beg your pardon. A marriage of convenience, he clarified, his tone businesslike. For 1 year. During that time, you would serve as mistress of my household and guardian to my niece. After the year concludes, we would discreetly separate. You would receive a generous settlement allowing you to live independently. Shock rendered Sophia momentarily speechless. When she found her voice, it emerged as barely a whisper. "Why not simply hire me as a governess? Caroline needs more than a governess. She needs a maternal figure, someone with authority in the household." He ran a finger along the brim of his hat. "And I need to present a respectable front to society. The rumors about our bachelor lifestyle have become troublesome, particularly now that I have a child in my care. But surely you could find someone more suitable. I require someone with impeccable breeding but desperate circumstances. Someone who understands discretion and will adhere to our arrangement without developing expectations." His gaze was unnervingly direct. "You are perfect for my purposes, Miss Ormond." Sophia felt as though the floor were shifting beneath her feet. "This is highly irregular, my lord." "Indeed. But practical for us both." He stood, moving to the window where he gazed out at the London street. "You gain financial security and avoid the degradation of servitude. I gain a temporary wife to silence the gossips and provide stability for Caroline." "And after the year?" Sophia asked quietly. "You will retain your title as countess, though we shall live separately. I'll provide you a house in Bath or perhaps Edinburgh, somewhere respectable but distant. Society will assume you prefer country life to London's bustle." The proposition was outrageous, yet Sophia found herself considering it with alarming seriousness. To become a countess rather than a governess, to avoid the scrutiny and frequent humiliations faced by paid companions. "What of marital obligations?" she asked, her cheeks burning with the impropriety of the question. Lord Sherrington turned, his expression unreadable. "This would be a marriage in name only, Miss Ormond. I have no interest in forcing unwanted attentions upon you." Relief and, strangely, a flicker of something like disappointment passed through her. She pushed the latter feeling aside as absurd. "May I have time to consider?" she asked. "You have until tomorrow morning." His tone brooked no negotiation. "The bailiffs arrive at noon." With that, he collected his hat and gloves, bowed perfunctorily, and departed, leaving Sophia staring after him in a daze. The Earl's London residence on Grosvenor Square loomed before Sophia like a fortress. 3 stories of Portland stone with gleaming windows and pristine white steps leading to an imposing black door. Her new home, at least for 1 year. She had sent her acceptance letter that evening, seeing no viable alternative. By morning, Lord Sherrington had dispatched his solicitor with papers to sign and instructions for their hasty wedding 3 days later. The ceremony had been a cold, businesslike affair in a small church with only the required witnesses present. No family, no friends, nothing to suggest a union of hearts rather than convenience. Lord Sherrington had placed a simple gold band on her finger, and just like that, she had become the Countess of Sherrington. Now, as the carriage came to a stop, Sophia fought to calm her nerves. This was her chance to make a new beginning, to provide stability for a motherless child, and to secure her own future. A footman opened the carriage door and helped her descend. Lord Sherrington, her husband, was already at the top of the steps, watching her with that same inscrutable expression. "Welcome, Lady Sherrington," he said as she approached, offering his arm to escort her inside. The entrance hall was magnificent, with marble floors, a sweeping staircase, and family portraits lining the walls. Sophia tried not to gape as a silver-haired butler bowed deeply. "Welcome, my lady. I am Simmons. The staff has assembled in the drawing-room to meet you." Sophia nodded, suddenly aware of her modest travelling dress and simple bonnet. "Thank you, Simmons." Lord Sherrington guided her through to a grand drawing-room where a line of servants stood at attention. As Simmons introduced each one, Sophia tried to commit their names and positions to memory, knowing how crucial it was to establish proper authority from the beginning. "And where is Lady Caroline?" she asked when the introductions were complete. A tense silence fell over the room. Lord Sherrington cleared his throat. "My niece is indisposed at present. You shall meet her at dinner." The housekeeper, Mrs. Weston, exchanged a telling glance with the butler. Clearly, indisposed was a polite euphemism for something else entirely. After the staff was dismissed, Lord Sherrington led Sophia to her chambers, a suite of rooms decorated in soft blues and creams, with elegant furniture and fresh flowers on every table. "These were my mother's rooms," he explained, standing awkwardly at the threshold. "I thought you might find them comfortable." "They're lovely," Sophia replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Thank you. My chambers are through that door." He indicated a connecting door across the sitting room, but it remains locked from both sides. "Your privacy is assured." Sophia nodded, unsure how to respond to such a statement. "I've instructed Mrs. Weston to assist you with anything you need. Your lady's maid, Jenkins, will arrive shortly to help you settle in." He hesitated, then added, "Dinner is at 7. Caroline will be present, and I should warn you, she can be challenging." With that enigmatic caution, he bowed and left her alone in her new quarters. The warning proved entirely insufficient. Lady Caroline Sherrington was not merely challenging, she was a hurricane disguised as a small girl in white muslin. Sophia entered the dining room at precisely 7 o'clock, dressed in one of her few presentable gowns, a deep burgundy silk that had belonged to her mother and which she had hastily altered. Lord Sherrington stood when she entered, but the little girl seated across from him remained stubbornly fixed to her chair, her arms crossed over her chest. "Lady Caroline," Lord Sherrington said with evident strain, "rise and greet your new aunt." The child glared at him, then at Sophia. She had Lord Sherrington's grey eyes but with a fierce intensity that her uncle's controlled demeanour lacked. Her dark curls were neatly arranged, though several rebellious strands had already escaped their ribbons. "I don't want a new aunt," Caroline declared. "And I don't have to listen to her." "Caroline," Lord Sherrington's voice held a warning. The girl stood with exaggerated slowness, her small face set in a mask of defiance. "How do you do, Lady Sherrington?" she recited tonelessly, executing a perfect but utterly insincere curtsy. "I'm very pleased to meet you, Lady Caroline," Sophia replied warmly, refusing to be provoked. "I've heard so much about you." "All terrible things, I expect," the child retorted. Lord Sherrington closed his eyes briefly, as though summoning patience from some rapidly depleting internal reserve. "I've heard you're intelligent and spirited," Sophia said, taking her seat as the footman held her chair. "Those are admirable qualities." Caroline looked momentarily thrown by this response but recovered quickly. "Did Uncle Alexander also tell you that I made my last governess cry? She left after only 2 weeks." "Caroline, that is quite enough," Lord Sherrington interjected sharply. "Lady Sherrington is not your governess. She is my wife and the mistress of this house, and you will show her proper respect." The first course arrived, momentarily halting the conversation. Sophia used the interruption to study the Earl. Despite his stern demeanour, she detected genuine concern in the way he watched his niece. There was affection there, buried beneath layers of aristocratic reserve and evident frustration. "Lady Caroline," Sophia said gently once the servants had withdrawn, "I understand that you've experienced a great deal of change recently. Losing your mother must have been very difficult." The girl's defiant expression wavered. "What would you know about it?" "I lost my mother when I was 9, Sophia replied honestly. "And my father passed away just 3 months ago." Caroline's eyes widened slightly. "Oh. So you see, I do understand something of what you're feeling." Sophia picked up her soup spoon. "I'm not here to replace your mother, no one could ever do that. But perhaps we might become friends, in time." "Friends?" Caroline repeated the word as though it were foreign. "Yes. Friends who might help each other navigate this new arrangement." Lord Sherrington watched this exchange with undisguised surprise, his soup forgotten before him. Caroline seemed to consider this proposition seriously. "Do friends have to do lessons together?" "I'm afraid education is non-negotiable," Sophia replied with a smile. "But friends might find ways to make lessons more interesting." The girl sighed dramatically. "I suppose I could consider friendship. On a trial basis." "That seems fair," Sophia agreed solemnly. For the first time since her arrival, Sophia saw Lord Sherrington's expression soften into something resembling approval. The next several weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Sophia established herself as mistress of the Sherrington household. There were staff to manage, menus to approve, correspondence to address, and, most challenging of all, Lady Caroline to befriend. The girl alternated between moments of grudging cooperation and spectacular rebellions that tested Sophia's patience and creativity. When Caroline refused her history lesson, Sophia transformed it into an elaborate game involving costumes from the attic. When the child rejected her piano practice, Sophia suggested they compose ridiculous songs about the household staff instead. Gradually, Caroline's defenses began to lower. The turning point came one rainy afternoon when Sophia discovered the girl crying quietly in the library, clutching a miniature portrait of her mother. "She's forgetting me," Caroline whispered when Sophia sat beside her. "She promised she wouldn't ever leave, but she did, and now I'm forgetting what her voice sounded like." Sophia gathered the child into her arms, her heart breaking. "Oh, my dear. Your mother hasn't left you, not really. She lives in your heart and in your memories." "But the memories are getting fuzzy," Caroline sniffled. "Then we must find ways to keep them clear," Sophia said, struck by an idea. "Would you like to make a memory book? With drawings and stories about your mother?" Caroline looked up, tears still clinging to her lashes. "Could we?" "Of course. And perhaps your uncle might contribute some of his memories too." Caroline considered this. "Uncle Alexander doesn't like to talk about Mama. I think it makes him too sad. Sometimes sharing memories, even sad ones, can help ease the pain," Sophia said gently. That evening, she approached Lord Sherrington in the library after Caroline had gone to bed. Their interactions thus far had been cordial but distant, passing each other in hallways, exchanging necessary information about household matters, occasionally dining together in polite silence. "My lord," she began, "I wonder if I might discuss something with you regarding Caroline." He looked up from his papers, eyebrows raised. "Has she misbehaved again?" "No, quite the contrary. She's made remarkable progress." Sophia took a seat opposite him. "But today I found her grieving for her mother. She fears she's losing her memories of Lady Elizabeth." The Earl's face tightened. "I see. I've suggested creating a memory book, drawings, stories, perhaps some mementos. I believe it would help her process her grief. And you wish me to participate in this project?" His tone was carefully neutral. "Your memories of your sister would be invaluable to Caroline." Sophia leaned forward earnestly. "Children need to talk about those they've lost, my lord. Silence only teaches them that grief is something to be hidden away, not healed." Lord Sherrington was quiet for a long moment. "You speak from experience?" "Yes. After my mother died, my father never mentioned her name again. He removed her portrait, gave away her belongings. It was as though she had never existed." Sophia's voice grew soft with remembered pain. "It made my grief so much harder to bear." The Earl studied her with new interest. "I had not considered that my reticence might be harmful to Caroline." "You've done your best in an impossible situation," Sophia assured him. "Taking in your niece, providing for her needs, these are acts of great kindness." "Kindness had little to do with it," he replied dismissively. "She is my responsibility." "Not every man would view it so," Sophia countered. "Many would have dispatched her to distant relatives or a boarding school." He looked away, uncomfortable with her praise. "When do you propose to begin this memory book?" "Tomorrow, if you're agreeable. Perhaps you could join us for tea and share some stories about Lady Elizabeth as a girl? I'm sure Caroline would treasure hearing about her mother's childhood." Lord Sherrington hesitated, then nodded once. "Very well. For Caroline's sake." Tea the next day proved a revelation. The Earl arrived in the nursery looking distinctly uncomfortable, but Caroline's eager face seemed to ease his tension. Sophia had prepared small cakes and set out art supplies on the table. "Uncle Alexander, Aunt Sophia said you would tell me stories about Mama when she was little like me." The Earl looked startled at Caroline's use of Aunt Sophia. It was the first time the child had referred to her new aunt with any warmth. Sophia herself felt a curious flutter in her chest at hearing the affectionate title. Yes, well. He cleared his throat and took a seat. I suppose I could share a few memories. What began as stilted recollection soon transformed into animated stories. The Earl described his sister's misadventures, how she had once hidden frogs in their governess's desk drawer, how she had climbed the tallest tree on the estate to win a bet with him, how she had insisted on learning to fence despite their father's objections. Caroline drank in these tales with wide-eyed delight, occasionally exclaiming, "That sounds just like me." The Earl would smile ruefully and murmur, "Indeed it does." As the afternoon progressed, Sophia observed a change in Lord Sherrington. The rigid set of his shoulders loosened, his voice grew warmer, and once, when recounting how Elizabeth had fallen into a pond while chasing ducks, he actually laughed, a rich, deep sound that transformed his austere features. Sophia found herself watching him more than listening to the stories. This was a different man than the cold aristocrat who had proposed their business arrangement, a man with hidden depths and carefully guarded emotions. When the nursery clock chimed 5, the Earl seemed surprised by the passage of time. "I must attend to some correspondence before dinner," he said, rising reluctantly. "Can't you stay a little longer?" Caroline pleaded, tugging at his coat sleeve. "I want to hear about Mamma's wedding day." Something flickered across his face, a shadow of old pain. "Perhaps another time, Caroline." As he turned to leave, he paused beside Sophia. "Thank you," he said quietly. This was unexpectedly pleasant. She smiled up at him. "The first of many such afternoons, I hope." His grey eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Yes. I believe I would like that." After he departed, Caroline looked thoughtfully at Sophia. "Uncle Alexander seems different when you're around. Less grumpy." "Does he?" Sophia busied herself gathering the tea things to hide her flushed cheeks. "MMHMM. I think he likes you." Caroline picked up her drawing of her mother. "Do you like him, Aunt Sophia?" The question caught her off guard. Did she like Lord Sherrington? The man who had essentially purchased her as a temporary wife? Yet the Earl who had shared tea with them today was not the cold businessman who had proposed their arrangement. "Your uncle is a good man," she answered carefully. "He cares deeply for you, even if he doesn't always show it in ways that are easy to recognize." Caroline nodded sagely. "Adults are complicated." Sophia laughed, relieved by the child's assessment. "Yes, my dear. We certainly are." Spring blossomed into summer, and the Sherrington household settled into new rhythms. Caroline's lessons progressed remarkably well once Sophia discovered the girl's love of dramatic storytelling and incorporated it into her studies. The memory book grew thick with drawings, pressed flowers, and written recollections from both Caroline and the Earl. Lord Sherrington, or Alexander, as Sophia had cautiously begun to think of him, though she never addressed him so, joined them more frequently. Afternoon rides in the park, visits to museums, even picnics when the weather permitted. To the outside world, they presented the image of a perfectly harmonious family. Yet Sophia could not forget the temporary nature of their arrangement. 5 months had already passed. In 7 more, she would be expected to remove herself to some distant location, retaining her title but losing this life she had built. The thought troubled her more with each passing day. Not merely because she had grown fond of Caroline, though she had, desperately, but because her feelings for the Earl had evolved in ways she had never anticipated. She found herself noticing small details about him, how his brow furrowed when he was deep in thought, the rare smile that transformed his stern features, the gentleness of his hands when he helped Caroline mount her pony. These observations stirred emotions that had no place in their business arrangement. One evening in late July, a thunderstorm rattled the windows of Grosvenor Square. Sophia was reading in the library when the door burst open and Caroline rushed in, white-faced with terror. "Aunt Sophia," the child cried, flinging herself onto the sofa. "I hate storms. Make it stop." "Oh, darling." Sophia put aside her book and wrapped her arms around the trembling girl. "I'm afraid I can't control the weather." But you're perfectly safe here with me. Another crash of thunder made Caroline burrow deeper against Sophia's side. Mama used to sing to me during storms. She said angels were just rearranging furniture in heaven. Sophia smiled at the image. That's a lovely thought. Shall I sing to you too? Caroline nodded against her shoulder. Sophia began a soft lullaby, one her own mother had sung during childhood storms. The child gradually relaxed against her, eyelids growing heavy despite the occasional thunderclap. She didn't notice Lord Sherrington standing in the doorway until Caroline was nearly asleep. He watched them with an unreadable expression, his tall figure silhouetted against the hall light. She was frightened by the storm, Sophia explained softly. He nodded, moving into the room. Elizabeth was the same as a child. Our mother would sit up with her all night during bad storms. He settled into a chair across from them, his gaze lingering on Caroline's peaceful face. You've been good for her. The simple acknowledgement warmed Sophia more than it should have. She's an extraordinary child. Beneath all that defiance is a tender heart. Yes, he agreed quietly. Though few have had the patience to discover it. Another rumble of thunder, more distant now. Caroline stirred slightly but didn't wake. I should take her up to bed, Sophia whispered. Allow me. The Earl rose and carefully lifted his niece into his arms. Caroline instinctively wrapped her arms around his neck, still half asleep. Sophia followed them up the grand staircase to Caroline's bedroom, where the Earl gently deposited the child onto her bed. Together, they removed her slippers and tucked the blankets around her small form. The domesticity of the moment struck Sophia forcefully. This was what being a real family might feel like. In the hallway outside Caroline's room, they paused, suddenly awkward in each other's company without the child as buffer. Would you care for a brandy? Lord Sherrington offered unexpectedly. I find storms rather conducive to reflection. Sophia hesitated only briefly. Yes, thank you. In his study, the Earl poured 2 small glasses of amber liquid and handed one to her. The storm continued outside, but with less fury now, the rain beating a steady rhythm against the windows. You've transformed this household, he said after a long silence. I scarcely recognize it, or myself, these days. Sophia sipped her brandy, feeling its warmth spread through her chest. Is that a complaint or a compliment, my lord? A faint smile touched his lips. Decidedly a compliment. Though I admit I didn't anticipate quite such comprehensive changes when I proposed our arrangement. Nor did I, she admitted. I expected a business transaction, not, he prompted when she trailed off. How could she explain what this had become without revealing too much of her heart? Not to care so deeply for Caroline, she finished, choosing the safer truth. Only for Caroline. His voice was low, his eyes intent upon her face. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the brandy. Lord Sherrington, Alexander, he interrupted. Surely after 5 months as my wife, you might use my given name when we're alone. Alexander, she repeated, the name feeling both foreign and familiar on her tongue. I think perhaps we should remember the terms of our agreement. He set down his glass with deliberate care. And what of those terms troubles you at present? We agreed to a marriage in name only. For 1 year. She stared into her brandy rather than meet his gaze. With no entanglement of the heart. Is that what has developed? An entanglement of the heart. His tone was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Sophia gathered her courage and looked up at him. I cannot speak for your feelings, but I would be dishonest if I denied that mine have evolved beyond our original understanding. The silence that followed her confession seemed endless. The Earl's expression remained inscrutable as he studied her face. I see, he finally said. Just those 2 words, revealing nothing. Sophia felt mortification wash over her. She had misread the situation entirely, mistaking courtesy for something deeper. Forgive me, she said quickly, setting down her glass and rising. I should not have spoken so freely. Please, forget I said anything. Sophia. He stood as well, catching her hand before she could flee. Wait. The touch of his fingers around hers sent a tremor through her body. It was the first time he had used her given name, the first time he had touched her since placing the wedding ring on her finger. I am not skilled at expressing sentiment, he said carefully. My life has taught me to guard my emotions rather than reveal them. But if you believe your feelings are not reciprocated, you are mistaken. Sophia's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying that this arrangement has become something I never expected. His fingers tightened around hers. Something I find myself reluctant to end when our year concludes. Hope fluttered in her chest, but caution held it in check. Because of Caroline. Partly, he acknowledged. She needs you, that much is evident. But my reluctance is not solely on her behalf. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker grey in his eyes. I find that I need you as well, Sophia. Your kindness, your patience, your strength, they have become essential to me. Alexander, she whispered, scarcely believing what she was hearing. I won't pretend to offer grand passion or romantic declarations, he continued, his voice low and intent. I'm too old and too set in my ways for such displays. But I can offer honesty, respect, and a true partnership if you would consider making our temporary arrangement permanent. Sophia felt tears gather in her eyes. Are you asking me to remain your wife? Truly? Yes. His free hand rose to touch her cheek gently. Not as a business arrangement, but as a marriage in every sense. If that is what you want. It is, she admitted, her voice trembling. More than anything. Something in his expression shifted, softened, as though a weight had been lifted. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he bent his head and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, but when Sophia responded, sliding her hands up to his shoulders, it deepened into something more urgent. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him as thunder rumbled distantly outside. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. I should warn you, I'm likely to be a difficult husband at times. Old habits are not easily broken. Sophia smiled up at him. And I should warn you that I have no intention of being an obedient, silent wife. I shall continue to challenge you when necessary. I would expect nothing less, he replied, his eyes warm with affection. Indeed, I would be disappointed by anything else. A small sound at the doorway made them both turn. Caroline stood there in her nightgown, eyes wide. I woke up and got scared again, she explained, though she didn't look particularly frightened now. A sly smile spread across her face. Were you kissing? Alexander cleared his throat, looking decidedly uncomfortable. Lady Caroline, it is most improper to leave your bed at this hour and yes, we were kissing, Sophia interrupted, holding out her hand to the child. Would you like to know why? Caroline nodded eagerly, skipping into the room to take Sophia's hand. Because your uncle and I have decided that I shall remain here permanently. As his wife and your aunt. Would that please you? The girl's face lit up with joy. Forever and ever? You promise? Forever and ever, Alexander confirmed, his voice gruff with emotion as he placed his hand over theirs. We shall be a proper family. I knew it. Caroline crowed triumphantly. I told Miss Jenkins you would stay because Uncle Alexander loves you, and she said it was just a marriage of convenience. Sophia supplied, exchanging an amused glance with Alexander. Yes. But I was right and she was wrong. The child looked supremely satisfied. Now we can get a puppy. A puppy? Alexander echoed, baffled by this non sequitur. Miss Jenkins said we couldn't have a puppy because you might send Aunt Sophia away and then who would take care of it? Caroline explained with impeccable 8-year-old logic. But now Aunt Sophia is staying forever, so we can have one. Can't we? Sophia bit her lip to keep from laughing at Alexander's expression, a mixture of consternation and helpless affection. We shall discuss the matter of puppies tomorrow, he said firmly. For now, it's well past your bedtime, young lady. Caroline sighed dramatically but allowed herself to be led back upstairs, extracting promises along the way that the puppy discussion would be a serious one and not just a way to make her go to sleep. Later, when the child was tucked back into bed and the house had grown quiet, Alexander and Sophia stood together at the window of his study, watching the last of the storm drift away. His arm rested comfortably around her waist, her head against his shoulder. I offered marriage for 1 year in exchange for Caroline's care, he mused. How strange that in seeking a temporary solution, I should find a permanent happiness. Not strange, Sophia replied, turning in his arms to face him. Just unexpected. The best things often are. Outside, the clouds parted to reveal a star-filled sky, as clear and promising as the future that now stretched before them.